Let's go over a few of the exciting things that have taken place from the MMA world this year.
Being heard from now, about a minute gone by round 2. Oh! Justin Gaethje! Head kicks!
What's more electrifying than a TKO or submission in some cases? That's right, an earth-shattering knockout.
The counter. There you go.
Oh! Huge overhand!
Number 1. Sean O'Malley versus Aljamain Sterling. One of the most notable knockouts to occur this year was the fight between Sean O'Malley and Aljamain Sterling. Going into the fight, Sterling was the UFC bantamweight champion, but he wouldn't hold that title for much longer. The fight between Sterling and O'Malley only lasted 2 rounds. Less than a minute into the second round, O'Malley managed to catch Sterling directly on the jaw with a devastating right hand. The Jamaican dropped to the canvas.
What it might be like early round 2. Sterling unable.
O'Malley then became the UFC bantamweight champion, a title which he has yet to defend. Number 2. Terrence McKinney versus Ismael Bonfim. Although O'Malley's win over Sterling was one of the more notable knockouts of this year, the fight between Terrence McKinney and Ismael Bonfim has been ranked as the most exciting knockout of 2023. McKinney and Bonfim faced off at UFC 283. Both fighters had fantastic records going into the fight, with McKinney having a 13-4 record and Bonfim having an 18-3 record. Bonfim had a style more focused on striking and boxing, while McKinney had a more rounded style. But even though McKinney was a jack of all trades, as the saying goes, he was a master of none in this fight. Nearing the 3rd minute of the second round, Bonfim hit McKinney with a flying knee.
Fighting unbelievably right now. He sees. No way!
McKinney hit the canvas, giving the win to Bonfim by knockout. Number 3. Michael Johnson versus Diego Ferreira. Never doubt an old man's strength. Michael Johnson and Diego Ferreira faced off against each other at UFC Fight Night, Dern vs. Hill. Both fighters were older, especially for fighters, with Johnson fighting at 36 years old. Ferreira, meanwhile, was 38 years old. Johnson not only had the age advantage, but he also had a slight height and weight advantage. Surely Johnson won, right? No. Instead, during the second round, Ferreira hit Johnson with a devastating overhand right. Ferreira threw a jab at Johnson, then immediately followed up the punch with his overhand right. Johnson went limp before falling to the ground.
The counter. There you go.
Oh! Huge overhand right!
As Ferreira went down onto Johnson and tried to follow up, the coach got him off and awarded the fight to Ferreira. Number 4. Derek Lewis versus Marcos Rogerio de Lima. Let's move up a few weight classes and talk about some heavyweights. After all, heavyweights are arguably amongst the most exciting fighters in combat sports. Derek Lewis, in particular, is a notable and exciting heavyweight fighter among UFC fighters, and his bout against Marcos de Lima is a perfect example of why. Lewis and de Lima faced off at UFC 291, but the fight ended just as quickly as it began. While the first bell rang, Lewis immediately ran at de Lima and hit the Brazilian fighter with a flying knee.
Derek Lewis opens with a switch knee!
As it hit, de Lima fell, and Lewis got on top of de Lima, following up with strikes. Derek Lewis won the fight in 33 seconds via knockout. Number 5. Raufeon Stots versus Patchy Mix. To make another transition, let's jump from the UFC to Bellator. The fight between Stots and Patchy Mix was ranked as the 16th best MMA fight in 2023. Going into the fight, Stots was a slight favorite against Mix, but as some of the other fights in this list have shown, bets mean nothing in the cage. Patchy No Love Mix won the fight within the first few minutes of the first round. Mix and Stots went to the ground, and while they were on the ground, Mix hit Stots with a knee to the head. This knocked Stots out.
Oh, he's out!
A monster shot! And
Patting Mix's record up to 18-1. Number 6. Alex Pereira versus Israel Adesanya 2. Israel Adesanya is another huge and established name in the UFC. Alex Pereira, meanwhile, was the champion going into this fight at UFC 287. Pereira and Adesanya had faced off previously at UFC 281, with the fight going to Pereira. Pereira won the fight via knockout in the 5th round after several strikes to Adesanya's head. Going into UFC 287, however, it seemed like the last stylebender was bent on revenge. Israel Adesanya won the fight in the 2nd round and managed to knock out Pereira with a counter right.
Pereira's so dangerous.
Oh! Counter right from Adesanya!
The fight was another insane performance and has been ranked within the top 50 fights in MMA history. Number 7. Umar Nurmagomedov versus Raoni Barcelos. Oh, those Russians. Russians have made a huge name for themselves in the fight scene, with some of the UFC's greatest fighters coming from the motherland or having ancestry from there. The legendary Khabib hailed from Russia, and Umar is similar. Umar faced off against Raoni Barcelos at UFC Fight Night Strickland vs. Imavov. Going into the fight, Umar was a huge crowd favorite, with 1,000 people betting on the Russian, compared to only 650 betting on Barcelos. Just like the crowd predicted, the fight was a short one that was in Umar's favor. The fight lasted nearly the entirety of the 1st round. With only 20 seconds left on the clock, the Russian managed to land a hook on Barcelos that sent the underdog crashing to the mat.
Guys, so far.
Oh my goodness!
This fight was actually ranked number 52 in the best fights in the UFC for 2023, as well as the 3rd most exciting knockout of 2023. Number 8. Charles Oliveira versus Beneil Dariush. Next up, let's go over the bout between Charles Oliveira and Beneil Dariush. These two faced off at UFC 289 as part of the main card. From the start of the fight, Oliveira was constantly pressuring Dariush. It was a textbook example of foreshadowing. Dariush attempted to keep Oliveira away with jabs and kicks, but was unsuccessful against his opponent. Du Bronx, as Oliveira goes by in the ring, was there to make an example of Dariush and was hell-bent on finishing the fight in an exciting manner. Multiple times during the fight, Oliveira managed to back Dariush up against the wall with his oppressive strikes. Dariush eventually responded by taking Oliveira to the ground. While the two were on the ground, they began unleashing devastating elbows and strikes on one another. It seemed like Dariush might have taken the reins as he was on top of Oliveira, but then, as Dariush tried to stand up, Oliveira brought him back down. The two continued grappling. It seemed like Du Bronx wanted to remain on the ground. Eventually, the two stood back up, but continued to grapple while standing up. The 1st round was coming to a close. Then, the boom happened.
Well, he can make that happen.
Oh! Huge head kick and a left hand for Oliveira!
Dariush got caught with several of Oliveira's punches and slumped to the ground. As he went down, Oliveira took the opportunity to pounce on Dariush and began violently pounding his head in. The ref came and called it quits, handing Du Bronx the win, rightfully so. Number 9. Dustin Poirier versus Justin Gaethje 2. The fight between Oliveira and Dariush was certainly entertaining, but you know what's more entertaining than a simple knockout? A fight for a championship belt. Who doesn't love a new champion being crowned? Going into UFC 291, the unique BMF belt was vacant. Although the BMF isn't a weight class belt, it's still regarded as a highly prized belt amongst fighters. Both Poirier and Gaethje wanted to be the baddest when the two fought at UFC 291. Although both fighters were definitely hard, softies don't get far in the fight scene. It seemed like Gaethje was the harder of the two. Both fighters viciously punched and kicked one another until Gaethje managed to land a devastating head kick on Poirier.
Gone by round 2. Justin Gaethje!
When that kick landed, Poirier went down and the ref gave the win to Gaethje. Number 10. Rinya Nakamura versus Toshiyomi Kazama. Kicks are underrated in fights and can definitely deal some damage, but punches are arguably deadlier. Not only are they harder, but they can easily cut someone. Toshiyomi Kazama learned how deadly a punch can be firsthand when he faced off against Rinya Nakamura. Nakamura and Kazama are both up-and-coming fighters, but Kazama, aka the silent finisher, has had the most fights between the two. Nakamura, meanwhile, was undefeated after 6 fights. The two faced off against each other at UFC Fight Night Lewis vs. Spivak, and both definitely brought the heat. Both of the Japanese fighters viciously charged at one another, throwing strike after strike. It was clear they were there for a knockout. After an exchange of punches, Kazama got caught with a stiff left hand from Nakamura.
But that's what I love to see. That's what makes it great. Oh, he's out! He's got knocked! Somebody out! Cold!
The silent finisher silently went down, and the fight was finished, giving Nakamura his 7th win.